What's up, everybody? Welcome to Cru Online. If you don't know me, my name is Drew, and we are so happy that you're tuning in tonight. And tonight, I have with me a thing of spaghetti. I have a thing of spaghetti. This is, you may not be able to see, it's really thin. It's called angel hair pasta. If you like pasta, you might like angel hair. And I have this with me because I want to do a little experiment, okay? I also have my keys with me. These are my real keys. I have like 8 keys on here. I have a few keychains, Cru keychain right there. You like that? Cru keychain. But they don't weigh very much. They're pretty light. I would say maybe half a pound, definitely not more than a pound. Now, do you think that this thing of angel hair pasta can hold up these keys that are not very heavy? What do you think? I don't know what you're saying, so we're just gonna do it. You ready? 3, 2, 1. No, it breaks really, really easily. All this pasta is good for. It's good a little eating, even if it's dry pasta, because in quarantine you get a little desperate, right? But I also have this bunch of pasta. I have a bunch of pasta here, and if you put this pasta not just through my light keys, but instead put it through a weight. See, this is a 10-pound weight, and you put it through this weight, this pasta is not breaking. You get a nice workout in, but this pasta is not breaking. And here's why this is important. You might be thinking, Drew, that's super weird to talk about here at Cru tonight. But it's not, because that's exactly what we're talking about tonight. Tonight we are talking about community. And we're talking about how we are made for community. We are made to be together, to live in community with one another, because together we are much stronger. And so we are so excited about this message tonight, and Parker is going to take it away right now.
Well, hey, what's up, Cru? My name's Parker, and as you can tell, behind me there's a whiteboard, and we're going to dive into community, and I want to make this easy for you. So pay attention to the board. It'll be super quick. This won't be like school, I promise. We're going to fly through Genesis 1. We're starting all the way back in Genesis 1 when God created the earth and everything in it out of nothing to get us to where we want to go tonight. And I'm hopefully going to show you something that maybe you've never noticed before. But if you start all the way back in Genesis 1, I'll summarize it for you, but God creates the light and the darkness, the day and night, and he calls it good. And you're going to start to see a pattern here as we go down. He creates the earth, sky, and the seas. He says they're good. Creates the plants, trees, the fruit, says they're good. The sun, the moon, the stars, good. Fish and the birds, good. The land animals, good. And then he creates you and me. Then he creates humanity. And after he's created everything, he creates us in his image. He looks back at all of it and he says it's very good. And then he rests on the 7th day. He created us on the 6th day. He rests on the 7th day. And then what happens is you go to Genesis chapter 2 and we see the first thing that God says is not good. The very first thing in all of creation that God says is not good. What do you think it is? We're actually going to show you a verse on the screen. It's actually Genesis 2:18. So check this out. Genesis 2:18 says this: "It is not good for the man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him." So we see from the very, very beginning, the first thing in all of creation that God said was not good is you and me being alone. Humanity being alone. Adam being alone. Being alone was the first thing that was not good. It's never been good. From like day 8 of creation, being alone is not good. Now, some of you might be wondering, okay, why is this so important right now? Why are we talking about this right now? Because you are already physically isolated. And the next thing to happen is for you, the natural pull is for you to be relationally isolated. And you may be feeling this right now, where your relationships aren't as close, you feel distant, you feel like people or maybe yourself are kind of pulling away. And we've already established that from day 8, that this is not good. It's not a good thing for you to be alone, to be relationally alone. It's not a good thing at all. In fact, you were hardwired for community. It's what you were created for. You were created to be known, to be loved, to be accepted. You were created to be in community with people, and ultimately, we'll talk about tonight, with God. Well, you are hardwired for community. You are not meant to go through this life alone. Mentally, physically, emotionally, you are not meant to go through this life alone. And the tendency in quarantine is to move towards being alone. And it's actually really dangerous. I want to show you a verse right now. This is Proverbs 18, verse 1. It says this. Check out this verse. It says, "Whoever isolates himself seeks his own desire. He breaks out against all sound judgment." And there's two things in this verse that we see. When you isolate yourself, you seek your own desire and you forsake sound judgment. Both of those things are bad. If you talk about the seeks his own desire, if you read the book of James, James actually says this is the start of sin. That each one of us sins when we are led away and enticed by our own evil desires. So not a good thing. That this is actually the start of sin, and here's why it's sinful, and here's why it never really helps us. The second part of Proverbs 18:1 says we forsake sound judgment. And this is so important for us, that when you are isolated, you become your own judge. You become your own decider of what's true and what's good and what's healthy and what's right. And usually we're wrong. The Bible talks about how we need community. We need wisdom around us. Proverbs is full of this, how we need wise counsel around us to encourage us, to point us to truth, to call us out when, hey, that's probably not the best thing for you. Hey, you should probably apologize in this moment. We forsake sound judgment when we isolate ourselves and suddenly we're the sole decider of what's true and what's good for us. Isolation is harmful to us. We think isolation gives us perspective, it helps us figure out ourselves and all those things. Isolation does the opposite. In fact, in communities where you really figure out yourself, isolation is harmful to us. In fact, if you've ever thought about it, we punish people in this country with isolation. I don't know if you've ever heard this. We've got a photo, but there's one of the forms of punishment in the United States is called solitary confinement. What does that mean? That means when somebody breaks the law and they get caught, we put them in isolation to torture them. Why? Because isolation makes people go crazy. It makes you pull out your hair. It makes people go nuts. It makes people start hitting their head on the walls. It is not good for you to be alone. It's not good at all. And isolation is a form of punishment. And we see isolation being harmful in some of the movies we watch. Some of you may have watched Castaway. Long story short, Tom Hanks is in an airplane, it crashes, he ends up on an island by himself, and he finds a volleyball that was in the plane crash. He gets some mud and puts his handprint on it and draws a face in it, and he names it Wilson. I assume it's a Wilson volleyball. But then he talks to this volleyball, he cries with the volleyball, he yells at the volleyball, he sings with the volleyball, he dances with the volleyball, he gets mad and kicks the volleyball, and then he weeps because he can't find Wilson anymore and chases after this volleyball. I don't know what to tell you other than isolation is just not good for us. We were not made to go through this life alone. We were made for community. And the Bible talks about this everywhere. God himself is in community with himself. And we're not going to dive into the Trinity tonight, but God is one in nature, one in essence, but three parts. And he's always been in community with himself. And he has made us since day 8 to be in community with humanity, with each other, and ultimately, as we'll get into tonight, to be in community with him. The New Testament. So many books of the New Testament are written to communities, not to specific people. And even the ones written to specific people, like 1st and 2nd Timothy, are written to Timothy to instruct him on how to live with this group of people and lead them and care for them. But they're all centered around people. Jesus, when asked, how do we follow you? What's the greatest commandment? What's the greatest thing we can do? What did he say? He said to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, love him, and then love our neighbor as ourselves. Be in relationship with our neighbor. And what does that actually look like? Because I would argue tonight, and I'm not arguing this, I think Paul argues this in Galatians. We're about to show you a verse in Galatians, that you can't fully follow Jesus and obey Jesus unless you're in a community. Look at this verse in Galatians 6:2. Carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So when Jesus is talking about loving God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength, and loving our neighbor as ourselves, how do we practically do that? Galatians 6:2, and I put it up here so you can see it, but it's carry each other's burdens, and in this way you will fulfill the law of Christ. So what does it mean to fulfill the law of Christ? It means all of the commandments in the New Testament, in the letters that Paul and James and everyone else wrote, all of the commands, all the ways that they instruct us are to be carried out within the context of community. And we haven't written them all up here, but I'm going to go Vanna White for a second. But look at all of these. This is what we're called to do. Love one another. Be at peace with one another. Be devoted to one another. Honor one another. Accept one another. Instruct one another. Build up one another. Greet one another. Serve one another. Be patient with one another. Be kind and compassionate to one another. Forgive one another. Encourage one another. And spur one another on toward love and good deeds. Now, there's a lot of those, and I didn't even include them all. But you see that all of the commands, if you want to actually obey what Jesus has called us to do, you can't do any of these by yourself. That you were made to do these in community. You were made to live in community. And the incredible part about this is we're not just called to do and obey these things, but these are for us to receive as well. That this is why you need community, because when you're in a community, a healthy community with people that love Jesus, you receive the love. You receive the peace from them. You have people that are devoted to you, people that honor you, people that accept you and instruct you and build you up. You see where I'm going with this. It's not just stuff we're called to do, but when you're in community, you are surrounded with people who love you, who love Jesus, and are doing these things with you and alongside of you. And you become the recipient of all of these things as well. And the beautiful thing about all of this is the gospel. This is what Jesus has done for us. Is Jesus loves us so much that he looked down on this humanity that could not get it right, that we're so full of sin. All of us that are watching this, we are so full of sin. So what did God do? He became a man. He came down to earth and he carried our burden of sin. And where did he carry it? He carried it to the cross. And he was perfect and blameless and had no sin, but he took on our sin. He took on our burden to the cross, died with it, rose from the dead, and now we put our faith and our trust in him, and we have all of these things in Christ. We have love and peace and someone who can build us up, someone who accepts us eternally. We have all of these things in the gospel, and because of that, we're called to go and share those things with each other. This is how we are to get through this life, in community, step by step, with each other. I want to end by showing you a picture. You might be familiar with one of the people in the picture. If you don't know by now, one of the guys in the picture is Abraham Lincoln. The other guy in the picture is Joshua Speed. Now, a lot of you don't know who Joshua Speed is, but way early on in Abraham Lincoln's political career, Abraham Lincoln made a dumb political mistake that we'll let your social studies teachers teach you about. Made a dumb political mistake when he was young, and on top of that, he was in a relationship that he thought was going somewhere with a lady. That relationship ended, and both of these events caused this downward spiral in Abraham Lincoln's life that turned, or kind of led him to isolation. And the more he was isolated, the more depressed he became. And the more depressed he became, the more he withdrew and became more isolated. And you can see how this quickly becomes this ugly downward spiral that Abraham Lincoln was in, to the point where he didn't want to live anymore. And by God's grace, God gave Abraham Lincoln a guy named Joshua Speed, who came into his life, befriended him, basically moved into his house, slept in his room, started hiding all of the sharp objects and weapons around, talked him off the ledge, said, hey man, encouraged him, built him up, carried his burdens. And Abraham Lincoln made it. And I want to ask you a question. Imagine if the United States of America didn't have Abraham Lincoln in our history. Imagine if we didn't have all the things that Abraham Lincoln accomplished. And here's the point of the story. We got Abraham Lincoln because Abraham Lincoln had Joshua Speed. If there was no Joshua Speed, there would be no Abraham Lincoln. And why do I tell you that? Because we need you. God has given every single one of you watching this incredible gifts and incredible personality and incredible ways that you can live out every single one of these things that we've talked about. We need you. We are not us without you. We need you in our community, and you need a community. You need an us. We need you. We're not us without you, and you aren't you without us. That's the way God designed it. You were made to be in community with people, and God's given you incredible gifts. So if you're watching this and you've been distant, you've been isolated, maybe from Cru, man, jump in. We will gladly welcome you back. No questions, no judgment. Come on back. You need to be in community. If you're watching this and you've been distant from your small group, call them, text them, say, hey, I'm coming back, and they will gladly welcome you back. Why? Because they need you and you need them. It's the way we were made. It's the way we live out the gospel. We live out the gospel with each other in community. We're stronger together. We overcome together. We persevere together. We encourage each other. We're built up in the context of community. There's no way around it.
Well, we hope you enjoyed the message tonight. We're going to put up some questions right after I get done talking so that you can go and discuss with your small groups on Zoom. But before we do that, if you are not connected to a small group, if you do not have a small group community already, please DM us, message us, whatever, to let us know so that we can connect you to a small group, because we all need community. And on top of that, if you have something going on in your life and you need prayer, please do the same thing. Comment, message us, because we are a part of your community and we want to pray with you and walk through life with you. So we love you, and we'll see you guys next week.